I was hoping you weren't going to talk about this because I was like, we're going to end up crying.
Yeah. This episode is brought to you by Curious Elixirs. Curious Elixirs are booze-free craft cocktails infused with adaptogens to help you unwind. Curious Elixirs' bold, adventurous beverages are handmade from a team of world-class bartenders, herbalists, and food scientists. For the last 9 years, Curious Elixirs has been making booze-free beverages containing organic juices, herbs, spices, roots, and botanicals to make your mouth dance. Today we are drinking Curious number 6, which is a coconut pineapple painkiller by Curious Elixirs, and I'm super excited to try it. It has coconut cream, pineapple orange, lime and lemon juice, oat milk, and a bunch of other yummy stuff. Ginger, nutmeg, black pepper. Looks awesome. Okay, welcome to Comeback Kid. This is a show about addiction and recovery, and today we are here with Justin Warfield. Welcome. Hi. So let's get right into it.
All right.
What was it like when you first got sober?
That's a good question. Well, I needed it and I wanted it, right? And I think that's the key is we know so many people who struggle with addiction and alcoholism who obviously need it, but recovery is for those who want it. And so I was very fortunate in that the first time that I actually considered really doing it and taking action, I had total willingness. So I came in not only willing, but pretty beaten down and just like spiritually, mentally, more than like physically. Physically, obviously, it wasn't great, but I came in like, I want this. And I feel very fortunate that I wanted it so deeply. And I probably went after it with the same passion, attention, energy, focus, and drive that I did my addiction. So in the beginning for me, it was amazing. I came in and I felt an immediate sense of relief because growing up in Los Angeles, which I believe to be the mecca of recovery, I'd grown up around it and I've seen it on out in front of churches on the street corners, people with cups of coffee, smiling and laughing. People gathered outside of buildings and they never looked like they were having a bad time. Right. And because I had known people that had gotten sober or clean, I knew what was possible, but it wasn't until I fully accepted this is what I want to do. So in the beginning for me, it was amazing. It's not to say that there weren't days where it was uncomfortable, but it's hard to quantify just how uncomfortable it was in the end, drinking and using. So really, once I waved the white flag, that was when my life got great.
I imagine there have been times in recovery where, or maybe not, but for me, there have been times when I've wanted it less. I've kind of like slipped a little bit. And off that kind of pursuit of, I really need this and I want this. What do you do in those moments?
That's for sure happened. Just like every other thing in our lives, like we can take it for granted, right? Like something that we get at first, whether it's like you're a kid and it's like an incredible Christmas gift that you like unwrap and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I got this. And then eventually that toy might sit on the shelf, right? Or it could be a relationship that's really important to you and you lose sight of how crucial that is and how much you value it. And so you stop putting in the work for it. I think that's what it comes down to, right? Is the work. It's like, if you're in a romantic or a business or creative or like just platonic friend relationship, like those take work. You have to text, you have to call, you have to make efforts. And so I think that like when I have lost touch with my relationship with my recovery, right? Going with that metaphor. I've definitely done so over the years. And the one thing that keeps me plugged in is I've never lost touch with my fellowship, my sober community, because then they can hold me accountable. And if I can't see the distance between me and my program, or me and or my program and I, or meetings, they'll be like, "Hey, dude, like, haven't seen you on Tuesdays," or whatever that thing is. So I don't think that we're always the best arbiters of where we are and taking our temperature. Mm-hmm. Let me say this: we know when we're in a great place with it, with our program and our spiritual condition and our recovery. But we don't always know when we're in a bad place with it. And so luckily for me, it's been other people that sort of like reel me in, and, but it's interesting because I became aware about 4 or 5 days ago, and having a conversation with somebody, that I'm more active in my recovery now than at any point in my life, which is pretty wild because I've been doing this for a little minute.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How do you get in the middle of the pack, so to speak?
For me, it's saying yes is the first thing.
Yeah.
It's like in life, like I can, like when one has a tendency to isolate, someone's like, "Hey, we're doing a get together. Do you want to come over?" It's easy to be like, "No, I'm good. Thank you." It feels good to be wanted, but we also want to isolate sometimes and separate ourselves. I've spoken at, I spoke at a meeting last night. I spoke at a meeting last Thursday. I spoke at a meeting about 2.5 weeks ago. That helps. Meeting Friday night that I had to bring snacks to because, I raised my hand so that I'll be sure to be at that meeting. And I think it's saying yes and taking commitments and being accountable to other people. Someone said at a meeting the other night, that they had said in the past, "Well, that meeting sucks." And their sponsor said, "Well, what are you bringing to it?" So like, I try and come from a place of like, if I'm going in there, like it's a pit stop or like to fill my tank and then get back on the highway, I'm approaching it the wrong way. And I have to say like, what can I bring to this? How can I be of service? And I'm not doing that because like I'm like a spiritual giant or like such a virtuous person. It's just, I know that like that's where the results will come that'll make me feel more comfortable. Selfishly, you know what I mean? The byproduct is you get to help other people.
Right. So you stay in that role of service. I
stay in the role of service as much as possible, and I stay in the middle. I'm not the best at like picking up the phone and calling my sponsor. I have a, I mean, to be honest, like I just love it. That's how I stay in the middle. I love it. Like I'm totally aware that like everything good in my life came as a result of recovery. And so at this point in my life, I firmly believe that if I want the outside of my life to change, I have to start with the inside. And I fought that for a long time. Even though everything I have in my life is a result of my recovery, I remember very clearly one time driving down the street. I remember exactly where I was, like driving through Silver Lake, and I was thinking about how I wanted my life to change. And I was struck with this thought, and this is like not a voice literally, but something said to me like, if you want those things on the outside to change, you have to actually do the work on the inside. And it was so upsetting because I wanted somebody just to sort of life coach me and go, "Oh, if you want to do this and this will happen in your career," or whatever. And so like now I don't even think about what to do on the outside. And it's become like a muscle that I've exercised enough. So if I know that I want circumstances and conditions of my life or relationships or things to change, I just have to like do the work. And the work is not just going to meetings, being of service, but also like step work. And so for me, like I'm just really active in it right now. But there's been periods where I haven't for like weeks, months, but I'm always connected. And like the last thing I'll say about that is like, because, you and I are people who have like toured and traveled and not always like had one specific home base and are moving a lot. When I'm not, I plug in even harder. And when I came back from tour about a year ago, I found that there was all these new people in my community of recovery. And it was so exciting because they wanted it. They were passionate. And I was like an outsider and they didn't know me because I hadn't been around some of these meetings in a long time. And so I was like, I want to be a part of this. And so like I put out my hand and made sure that people knew me and ingratiated myself and threw myself into the center with the people I knew and loved. And then that spread outwards. And now I am in the center of that. So it's.
Wow. Yeah. It's inspiring to hear.
I'm an outgoing person too. Like it's not like I'm not a shy person. So it's like, it's not a big deal for me.
What are your thoughts about being a shy person trying to get in the middle?
Well, I think that it's that contrary action, right? Of like, I mean, like, think about it like in terms of like when you go to a party, like most of us would go to a party and be like, okay, like if you don't know anybody or if you're only there with one person, your person gets in a conversation with somebody else. Like, if you're like me, you're probably standing up against the wall just being like, okay, like who do I talk to? And like, if you want to have a good time, sometimes you have to force yourself into like uncomfortable situations or take that contrary action. But I also think the difference between like going to a party and going to like program of recovery is at the party that people might just stay in their cliques and groups and not welcome you. But I think it's really incumbent upon people that aren't shy or that are getting past their shyness in order to help themselves or others that they put out their hand. So it's like for me, if I see somebody who's shy, like I reach out and I'm like, hey, what's up? You know, and like, I think that's important. I'm also like pretty old school in the way that I was taught was that like, if there is somebody like that like I should go up to a guy or someone identifies as a male and like approach them. And that if it's somebody who's femme or female identifying, that like, rather than me approach them, grab somebody who I love and trust, who I know could be helpful and like throw them at them or walk over to that person and go, hey, like, do you know her? Like, you should talk to her. I just think that it's important just to like make sure people feel safe in those situations and they don't think that there's anything other than like the intention there.
Yeah, that's great because it's not always like that.
Which blows my mind. And like I haven't seen that since I first got clean and sober. Like, but it's crazy that
I've seen it.
That's so creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got sober really young.
I was thinking about that. Yeah.
How did that, like, how did you first come in?
You know, it's so funny. It's like now I look at it and I feel like most days I feel like I got sober like older, but that's ridiculous. Like, because I was a kid, but at the time it felt like just like a long slog of like being loaded that was like beating me down. So I came in at just shy of my 26th birthday. So I was 25. And so getting clean at 25 was crazy because, you know, things only really got like really, really gnarly probably around 20. You know, things were rolling before, maybe 19. I started kind of late. Like a lot of people like, you know, start 13, 14 or whatever. That wasn't my story. Like my first drug of choice was like adrenaline and, you know, doing graffiti, running from the police, like going out at night, like dangerous situations, like which later in life is triggering. And I have to be careful with adrenaline, whether it's like anger, you know, somebody attacking me on social media, like anything that can like traffic, because that stuff's super triggering. But for me, I started kind of late, but I hit the ground running at like 20. And by 25, it was awful. And so coming in and surrendering, I don't know that I could say what it was like. It's just, that was just my experience. Like at 25, when I came in, I was totally beaten down. And for me, what it looked like was picking up I was living in London, and there was a lot of isolation there because even though I had a community and friends and people I worked with, at the end of the night, it was just me alone in my flat, like alone with my thoughts. And it was dark. And I started picking up the phone and calling people and trying to get a reflection, because I had started to have these real questions. Like, the behavior that I was exhibiting was clear that I was like a drug addict who was going to die. But I started reaching out and just doing that very simple thing of like, do you think I'm an addict? Right. Which is like a crazy thing to do when you're doing something that so clearly is addiction. But I did that. I just started picking up the phone and going, do you think I'm an addict? Like some people that I was using with back in Los Angeles before I went to live in London that time, some people that were not addicts or alcoholics, some people that have known me before my active addiction and alcoholism, some people that I remembered I thought got clean or like were in a program. And I got the answers. Some I wanted, some I didn't. And I kept picking up, probably looking for a different answer.
Right.
And the answer kind of stayed the same.
Right.
And so I followed up that information with action, which was I called like a general service line, like a helpline. And nobody picked up. And I, for some reason, left a message, voicemail.
Wow.
And I went to bed like many other times before, where I was like, if you let me get through this, I promise, like, oh, fill in the blanks. And I woke up. I don't even know how I went to bed, passed out, but I woke up with a ringing phone that wouldn't stop, because I don't think I had a answering machine. It just, the phone kept ringing, like a landline, ringing and ringing. And I had a loft. My bed was literally up like in the rafters and I climbed down the ladder, and which made it easier to be willing, because I'd like, okay, like picked up the phone. I'm like, hello. And they're like, hi, you called. And I was like, oh no. Is that action followed up? It was that willingness followed up with action. They're like, you called. And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. And they're like, nope. Why'd you call? You called for a reason. Where are you? I told them where I was. They looked at a list. They said, there's this meeting. You should go there. And my life was completely different afterwards. And I honestly, I could get super emo about it. I have no idea what my life would have looked like if that person didn't pick up the phone, if that specific person wasn't the one answering the messages, who wouldn't let me wiggle out of it. Yeah. If they would have told me a different meeting, because I met people that I have relationships with to this day at that meeting. Yeah. So it completely changed my life. And I think that being 25 was good, because I was young enough to where I had lived a life that I was sick and tired of living, but young enough to where I felt like there was hope too. And I know that I've spoken to people. I spoke to somebody last night in a meeting who's my exact age, who's new. And I was like, it doesn't matter. It's not a race. It's quality of life. And like, you deserve to give yourself this life. But I could see that it's harder when you get older, because there's more to beat yourself up over, probably.
Do you think there's something about being young? And I know I've struggled with this because I came in at 21.
That's amazing.
I've definitely struggled with being young. Oh, I have more time to kind of go out.
Right.
And fuck around and see what happens. And, it's not a big deal. I'm under 30. That kind of mentality can take you out.
I think the danger of that is that thinking works under the assumption that we have a choice when we come back.
Yeah.
And what's been my experience, not personally, because relapse isn't a part of my story. It's a part of people around me's story. And so I've seen it intimately, and I've seen it where people come back and they make it and they build great lives. And I've seen it where they die. A lot more death than making it back. And nowadays, with what it looks like to be somebody who has to test the drugs and travel around with, additional drugs that will revive them in case of overdose, I just think that like the assumption that like, even with a handful of program or recovery, that you can like choose when you come back, because I truly believe that sort of old timey thing of like, you like like you pick, you choose the first drink or the first drug. And then after that, it's no longer your choice. So like, to me, it's like, if you believe that you're an addict or an alcoholic, the lie that like, it'll be different. And also like, I have friends that got clean and sober, like very young, like your age and younger. And they were like, I just want to I know the speech so well, because they come to you and they say, hey, like, I just want to let you know, since we're friends, like, I just feel like, look, my life is so much better because I did this and I don't regret. I mean, the speech is always the same. It's like, my life is like, I completely have this life because of recovery. And I know that, but I did get clean or sober young. And I just feel like there might be something out there, and like, maybe I'm not, I just have to test. And like that speech is always the same. And once or twice have I seen that person actually live a life that seems like could norm me. And that's with like, I can't even count how many people that it didn't make it back. Right. And so I just think it's based on, it's like listening to a lie, and a very dangerous one. And so like, I think with you or other people who get it young, the what ifs of what you might be missing out there, there's nothing out there. Like, if you really believe, and also like, we don't make it to like church basements and like, you know, senior citizen center and like sitting in weird rooms in circles with each other, or doing, you know, things that are against our nature by accident. Like, we don't fall into recovery as tourists. We come because our lives depend on it. So when we forget, we probably are like, I don't know, like, maybe that was a phase. Maybe that was just like based on the circumstances I was going through in my life at that time. And so I think that the most important thing that I can do is remember what it was like at its worst, not at its best.
Right. Yeah. I think coming in young can be hard for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also the like, wait, like, that was never around when I was using. Like, oh my God, that looks fun. Like, I could go down the list of like, I never had a mojito. Like, I never did, you know, like whatever. Like, you know, I was never around for illegal weed. You know what I mean? I never had that funky new drink they came up with. I never did that weird new drug that was cooked up. White Claw is not one that I felt bad about. Four Loko and White Claw were like phases where I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, but whenever those things come up, you're like, there's always an answer. There's always an answer. Why do I want a mojito? I don't. I like limes. Cool. Somebody will like put lime in like a weird mason jar, slam it down with like some club soda, and I'll drink it and I'll be like, this is fantastic.
Right.
And then like, I don't end up in jail.
Right. Were there times when you came really close to relapse, and how did you prevent it?
For me, no. They weren't. I don't know why some people get it and some people don't. Like, I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's an amazing woman, and we grew up together. We went to high school together. We're in recovery together, and we were talking about someone else who we went to school with who just died. And I said, and I saw them, and I said, hey, like, what? Why? Oh no, actually, it wasn't in person. It was texting, and I was like, why us and not him? And I was like, I went down the like, my belief was that he couldn't be like constitutionally honest with himself and others. But like, that's not my place to judge. That's just like, we're not saints. Like, sometimes we like have judgments, and I like, you know, like sometimes we look, we're like, I don't know. They kind of seem like they're still holding on to something, right?
Yeah.
Holding on to an old idea of themselves, holding on to an idea of what their life or career is supposed to look like, holding on to the cash and prizes. I don't know. And she was like, no, man, it's grace. That's why we got it. And I just kind of shut me up, because I was like, I think that's what it is, honestly. Like, I am not a religious person. I push back against certain prayers, certain language, and there's still that contrary part of myself. But I have 100%. I believe to my core that like a window of opportunity opened one night in like a very, very, very cold February, like when I was living in London, and I saw the window open, like a portal in a sci-fi movie, right? Yeah. Like when it's like that, like thing, and it's like, you got like, you know what I mean? It's like a movie like Back to the Future, like you got to get back, like you're erasing from the picture, whatever it is. I saw this thing closing, and there are many times before where I saw that and I didn't go through it. And that time I was like, I'm going to jump through that because I'm scared. To say I'm uncomfortable would be an understatement. But I was like scared of dying, but also like, oh my God, like this is the closest I've been to dying, but like I'm not behaving like someone who's afraid of it. So once I just jumped inside that window and became willing to do whatever it took to stay in that place, I believe that to be a moment of grace and like I've never gotten close to relapsing because I stay in that place. And it's my belief that that window isn't going to happen again if I do. Like, maybe that's what I told myself in the beginning so that I wouldn't. I don't care what it is. I just know that like I've never been close to picking up a drink or a drug because I worked so hard to have what I have that I didn't want to throw it away. Sometimes it could just be pride, and it could just be like, I don't want to give up my time, or I don't want to raise my hand, or I don't want to start over and lose the stuff. Sometimes it's just others around you, but I've never been close. And even somebody who's been traveling for the last, couple of decades, like even when I'm far from my group or my people or even when I'm far from my recovery, like you said at the top, where I'm like not doing the stuff, I just built a life of being clean and sober, and I never want to give that up. And I also think about it like if someone tried to take that from me, how I would protect myself. Like I was defending like the life of someone I love. And so I guard it in the same way, I guess.
How long has it been?
25 years, a little like over 25 years.
That's amazing.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
That's amazing.
It really, I really struggle with certain things in recovery at this point. They're different things. I try and look at like, I've been thinking a lot recently because I've been speaking a lot at meetings. I've been thinking about like, I'm not the best person to tell my story. I can tell the circumstances of what happened, but I think the more we tell our story, the more like you think that the more you told it, the more you remembered it and the more clear it got. But I actually think the more we tell our stories in life as storytellers, the more that they become copies of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Sure.
And so I try not to tell my story so much when I share in meetings, and I try just to talk about very specific things that are indisputable facts without me coloring it or dramatizing or making it cooler or more exciting or sexier or funnier, and then talk about where I'm at now, because I don't always trust my perception of things, not just as an alcoholic and addict, but also just as a person with an ego, right? But lately I've been struggling with like humility, false humility. And like sharing at a meeting last night, I said, I don't come in here to be a good person. I came in here, and I'm like, it's not that I'm a good person or that I'm virtuous. It's that I want to put out my hand as a newcomer. I want to do this. And then I was talking to someone afterwards and I was like, maybe that's the wrong information to say that I'm not a good person. Maybe I'm telling myself the bad information. Maybe by doing right actions and the right things, we become good people. And I'm working with accepting the fact that I am a good person. And that's where I'm at today. So like, it's not a struggle to stay clean and sober. It's been quarter of a century, which is insane. And by the way, coming in at 25, I've been sober half my life. That's crazy. I know that. But the reason why I talked about that other stuff is because it's okay just to say that and be proud of it. But like, I want to be like, oh no, like, because I don't want to seem like the person who's like pounding my chest. Like I'm an old timer, but like, it is a big deal. And I think it needs to be shown to the newcomer that it's possible, that like you can have a big, fun, wild, insane, amazing, exciting life and do whatever you want in recovery. Because my life was none of those things in the end of my drinking and using. There were times that were sexy. There were times that were exciting. There were times that were fun. There were times where I achieved high. There was also times where I burned it all down and I completely fucked everything up. And to be 51 years old, 25 years sober, and have like a really big life, there's some days where my life is so overwhelming and I'm just, the only thing I could do is pick up the phone, be of service, ask someone for help, or run to a meeting. And that hasn't changed. So like in that way, I can be just as raw as a newcomer sometimes. The only difference is I've exercised that muscle so many times. So I'm not going to be uncomfortable and just like reach for a drink. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Hopefully.
Yeah. You did the most beautiful thing for me about 1.5 years ago, which is my manager, Brett Radin, passed away, and you really showed up for me, and you came to the funeral, and it is something I will never forget. How does your sobriety enable you to show up for others?
I was hoping you weren't going to talk about this because I was like, we're going to end up crying.
Yeah.
It's not me, is all I can say. It's not. I want to be careful here because this is that thing I talked about like accepting truths or compliments without deflecting, which is not fair, and it's also not cool. And it's another weird form of ego, I think. But the other night I was in a meeting. It was like a men's stag, and I was sharing about a friend who died last week and how I had a show and I had to go play a show, and I left sound check and I went over to the memorial just so I could see my friend's son and daughter and give them a hug. And then I came back and I played the show, and I told this, and my friend said, well, yeah, of course, that's what you do. That's what you did for me when my brother died. And that's just like what people showed me what to do. You know what I mean? It's not because I'm so smart or I'm such a good person or I think that people showed me things to do in situations. And I think what we do as people who spend a lot of time hurting ourselves and others is we come into recovery and people teach us simple actions that build our self-esteem and make us feel self-esteem, that then make us capable of taking those simple actions that make other people feel better. And by doing that, we become the people that we are either supposed to be or want to be, right? And then we become good people. And so when that happened, it was just the next right action or intuitive thought, because those muscles have been exercised so many times that when I saw what you were going through, I was like, well, this is just what we do. Like, this is just no question. Like, so I'm uncomfortable talking about it because it makes me feel like I'm drawing attention to actions which are like, if I'm going to be like at a freeway exit and somebody is there and they're like asking for money and I give them $5, I'm not going to tell somebody about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is super funny because the other day I was like, wow, I used to do that all the time and give money to people in need. And like, I started exercising this muscle in the wrong way, where like I'd be busy with people and I'd see someone and I'd be like, no, I'm sorry, I don't have it. Or like, though I'm sorry, no, whether it's somebody wanting me to sign up about an environmental issue or political issue or money. Yeah. I've been flexing the wrong muscle for like the last few years of like, I'm sorry, no, like, and I was like, whoa, when did that happen? Because I used to be like, of course, or yes. And so again, when that happened with you, I was just like, it's a reflex. And it's easy to do when you're crazy about somebody, you think they're amazing, you really care about them, and they're in immense pain. It's like, of course you're going to do that, you know? I wanted to make sure that, I mean, we traveled together, we had experiences. And so being able to go to that thing and listen to the songs and hear the people speak and you speak was like, it made me feel good to show up for you. And it's only because somebody showed me how to do that. The same as somebody said like, hey, you got to make your bed when you like wake up. And I'm like, but why? Like, I'm going to get back in it later. They're like, well, that's just what you do. Mm-hmm. And I think that the way that people like us who are like gnarly drug addicts and alcoholics, the way that we build lives that are like creating things rather than destroying it is because somebody goes, that's just what you do. And like, we put enough of those little, that's just what you do's together. And then you learn how to like live. Right.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I'm going to say something because I feel like we're going there.
Okay.
I'm 60 days back.
Okay.
Yeah. I had 6 years and 60 days back. And
that's amazing.
That's everyone's reaction, and it stunned me.
Why?
Because I can't let go of the grief of losing, of feeling like I lost what I had.
But you didn't. You're like, it's not a race.
Right. Yeah, it's been coming back. It's been the most beautiful thing because everyone said, welcome. That's amazing. So happy you're here. Just positivity, positivity, positivity.
Yeah.
And it was not what I expected.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, okay, like, see to it that your experience could benefit you and others.
Yeah.
My 25 years does not help me. It's not going to get me a job. It's not going to walk into a restaurant and get me a friends and family discount. It's not going to make a red rope open and get me in a club, in a special room, or the VIP thing that I want as somebody who has wants and needs and desires and ego and thinks he's still special and fights that all the time. Mm-hmm. It's not going to make my wife think that I'm a good husband. It's not going to make my son think I'm a good dad. It's going to benefit others. My 25 years is only useful if I can help somebody else. And you're having had 6 years and now having 60 days and building that sober time, your experience is going to help others. And so like what I would say to you, since I don't personally have experience with the feelings surrounding relapse, unless they've been relayed to me, communicated to me from friends. If our sole purpose is to stay clean and sober and help somebody else with the same affliction, then that part of your story now is probably going to help others and may save somebody else's life. And so I think that the thing that I would say to you as a friend and like somebody who's like trudging the road with you is like that thing that you're talking about of loss or you didn't say loss. What'd you say? You said grief. I think that's connected to ego.
Totally.
And there's good ego and there's bad ego, right? And if you just focus on how can the story of what happened and what it's like now, it'll take the focus off of you. It'll take the grief will go away. I bet it'll become like how you can help others. And also like, I truly believe it's not a race. I just said that there were times where the only thing keeping me from, well, it's not the only thing keeping me, but one of the things that made me think about like what would happen if I went out was I'd have to raise my hand again. Like, yeah, that would not be comfortable. That would affect my ego. But at the same time, that doesn't really matter. Like, I feel like for me, I'm proud of you and I love you. And the fact that you're doing this is amazing because here's the thing, like, and with the platform that you have with this, to do it the way you're doing it is the realest and most amazing thing because there's somebody that I know who is a friend who had a very large platform about recovery, and they relapsed. This is my understanding of it, because I wasn't spending a lot of time with him at the time. But my understanding is that he was self-medicating. So it was like a slippery slope kind of thing, and not like, not like picked up a drink or started shooting dope, or like but it was like self-medicating for a legitimate reason. And then it slipped into something else, and he didn't tell people, and he wasn't honest about it. And because he had the platform that was big to talk about recovery, I think that the guilt and the shame ate away at him, and he ended up dying of an overdose. And that's what I would say to you, is the fact that you can sit here and be honest about it and talk about it and say, 60 days, and still have the curiosity to talk about what we suffer from and what we recover from, and to share it with others is amazing. And that's why I said it's amazing, because we suffer in silence, we die in silence, we're sick in silence. But like when we get honest and get real and get vulnerable, not only do our lives get better, but someone else is going to have their life change for the positive.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely.
And I judge that zero. Everybody comes in with their own emotions, with their own trauma, with their own history, with their own family of origin, with their own outside stuff. And, everyone has some version of anxiety or depression or all these things. And like, I don't know what it's like to like live in your skin, let alone my wife or my son or my parents. Like, I just know this, and this is uncomfortable sometimes. And some days it's the best. The last 5 months of my life have been the best and also the most painful. I'm just going to like suit up and show up, and I just have to do more work in order to get through it, So I don't know what your circumstances or situations are, or the feelings surrounding them. So I can't judge you picking up. Like, that's part of your story, and that's part of your origin story of how you're going to help others.
Thank you. One more question.
Okay.
What does being a comeback kid mean to you, and in what ways are you a comeback kid?
Wow. What does it mean to me? So like when I realized that was the name of the pod, I was like, I don't know, am I a comeback kid? And then I thought about it, and I was like, I got clean pretty young. And I think that like my whole story exists to show people that the lie that I was told growing up, to be a musician or a poet or an actor or a painter or a writer of great value, importance, creativity, mystique, legend, was that you had to be loaded, and you had to like sort of play with death up until the very end and either escape it or succumb to it. And I think that that's a lie. And I think like the greatest people that I admired of book, print, film, song, poem, and art when I was young, those people were great and amazing despite their addiction, not because of it. And so for me, I guess comeback kid means that when I was 16, I got a record deal, and I was like a really high achieving, like, oh my God, this dude's gonna blow up and all this stuff. And I didn't really have the tools to handle it, and I wouldn't listen to anybody in a lot of ways. I did. That's how I got there. But then I stopped listening to people. You kind of couldn't tell me shit. And my life crashed and burned. And then the comeback is like getting clean and sober at 25, building a life inside that was completely different than the one I had in my addiction. It's closer to who I was before I picked up.
Mm.
So the comeback isn't just the fact that I built a big life with a family and a career and helping other people in career, helping other people in recovery. The comeback is probably, while I started to talk about it as like the comeback is like, and then had another life after, that's outside shit. The real comeback is that I got to be the person that I was before I picked up, but just with more tools to handle life. Because like getting and staying sober and clean isn't hard. Life is hard, right? I think that life is what makes us relapse. I think life is what makes us go into depressions. Life is what makes us isolate, or for some people check out, you know, like, but like, I don't know. I guess the comeback is like twofold. It's like one that like, I thought that my life was over when I was 25. And it really just started when I was 20, like when I surrendered to all this, you know? And like I built a life that's way more impressive than I had at 16 or that I imagined it could be. And sort of coming back to like whatever it is I'm supposed to be. And I'm still figuring that out. Yeah.
Beautiful. Justin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was amazing.
You're the best. Thank you for having me.